introduce themselves. Our first question for Commissioner Outlaw, reflecting on your vast career experiences in Oakland, Portland, Philadelphia, and now with the New York and New Jersey Port Authority, you've been through a wealth of challenging circumstances, to say the least. What do you see as some of the key differences between East and West Coast policing?
That's not a softball. Good evening, everyone. My name is Danielle Outlaw, and it is an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for. As mentioned, I'm currently sitting as Deputy Chief Security Officer for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And I've been in that position for about a year. So I'm in that transition from traditional sworn law enforcement uniform badge done to the best of both worlds with corporate security on one side and a full-fledged police department with a great superintendent and all of his team on the other. I was working for 2 states. So if you have any questions about that, I'm more than happy to talk about how that works. But as mentioned, I grew up in Oakland, in California, so I am a West Coaster. I started with the Oakland Police Department there. There was this 2-week career training program at my high school. I didn't think they would select me, but I put my name on the wall and they chose me. I had no idea. It's significant because I did not have law enforcement in my family. My grandfather and my uncle, they were in the military, but it wasn't something that was ingrained. You know, when I came to the East Coast, I saw the generations of family in the Philadelphia, for example. That just wasn't my upbringing. I was afraid of the police. Police had come to my home and maybe people that I loved. So I didn't, as a child, so I didn't really have that, hi, officer, such and such, when they go by type interaction. So for me, to do this immersion program with the police department as a young kid is likely what opened the door for me to matriculate through all this pipeline that I didn't really know was a thing in Oakland. And after this program, when they selected me, we said, hey, we have this Explore program. We meet these kids once a week after school and check it out. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And I found myself around young people that actually admired me. And it opened my eyes to say, okay, well, it's time to be the first one in my generation to go to school. Actually, thinking about family at the time to go to school or go to college. They said, hey, wait, before you go, we have a program, that program. And it's a part-time paid program, you get school uniform, everything but the gun, right? But, you know, light blue shirt, stripe down the leg, you do all the things. I think it was maybe like $7 an hour, so I thought it was at the time. So when it came time to graduate from college, they said, well, you know, you're gonna age out, you gotta do something. And then life happened. Yeah, I had my son, and I said, I gotta make some decisions. I thought I was gonna go straight through and get a doctorate. I was gonna be a social psychologist, and OPD was still there saying, hey, still be a cop. I said, you know what? Let's do this. So I took my physical agility. My son was 2 weeks old. I had no business being out there, but you know, the things that you want to do when you're motivated and you're driven, that's what you do. And the rest is history. So I found myself manipulating through this pipeline for young people. And I left Oakland as a deputy chief of police to take the job as chief of police in Portland, Oregon. The timing was impeccable for me. I just didn't choose, you know, it was quiet in Portland when I got here. That is one. But I say all that to say, in Portland, Oregon, you know, this civil unrest, talk about the difference between East Coast, West Coast, it really matters before you know anything. You gotta be a student of where you're going. So it's not just looking at what's going on in the department, what are the issues that you're facing, or thinking, what's what is the environment that we do in the state in the area. When I came to the East Coast, I know I was outlaw from the left coast. Because there's an assumption that you bring these, you know, political ideologies with you. I doubt it, but you know, that doesn't define who you are as an individual. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't have an idea of politically what's going on because it impacts the culture in that area. Here's an example. In Oregon, the laws are interpreted very loosely. So there was an assumption when we were dealing with civil unrest. Portland, Oregon, if you guys don't know, is the home of Rose City Antifa. Leave that here. So there's an assumption. I thought that I could come and do things that be done in Oakland, in California, in Oregon. Laws are different. So in California, it's legal to commit a crime while you're wearing a mask. In California, as police, we were able to live stream, but also record at the same time. Why is that important? Because if you're dealing with civil arrest, or if you identify somebody that's committed a crime, you need to go back and grab them and arrest them. You have to report it. Oregon, you cannot do that. You pretty much have to establish probable cause before you click the button to report. So when I found myself in front of the camera saying, you know, this is why we use sports, like we use abortion at the time, there's what we're dealing with. We were singing Molotov cocktails, rocks, whatever it was. You know, the reporters would say to me, well, we don't have time for that. Show me your evidence. We have videos of your officers doing it. So I can see where's your evidence. It was because we couldn't record. And then when we recorded, it was $8 short. So you have to think about, you know, how the laws in that area will impact not only your ability to do your job and wishful thinking, but then also with the culture of the area that you're working in, because that's going to impact how you're able to wherever you are. I'll just say this, public support varies where you are just regionally in the world. And I wouldn't even say East Coast versus West Coast, but I mean, you know, Texas, folks, mayors come out and, oh yeah, and again, this isn't being political, you have to pay attention to what's going on. I found myself at one point in my career being a fish, you know, swimming upstream, being one of the very few chiefs to say publicly, no, the answer is not defund, it's invest. The thing you're calling for, training, equipment, all these things that cost money. And we also agree with you that you should invest more money in social services because we shouldn't be doing all these things. So it's not an either one, right? It's a both and. But depending on where you are in the world, you might find yourself being the only one standing at the podium saying this. Whereas maybe down south, you know, I'm standing at the dais or at the podium with a slew of people around me that support that. So those are also things you got to pay attention to. And then as an outsider coming in, you're going to have expectations depending on the culture of that community, what they want at that time. And quite frankly, the expectations might be different than others because they don't know you. So you're going to be spending time going to various places inside the department and outside the department to garner these relationships because they want to be able to say, I know the chief, I know the commissioner, I know the superintendent, and it's really not a different based on culture, right? Portland is very passive. You guys seen that insurance commercial where it's like a four-way stop sign and you're like, no, you go, no, you go, no, you go. At the stop sign. Hey, troopers, you haven't seen the commercial? Okay, either way, but the whole Portland nice thing is you're gonna sit in a meeting for 2 hours because you want to come to consensus. And then the joke is somebody will always walk away and say, why did you do that? You know what I mean? So the commercial was, someone was upset that the person actually accepted the offer to go and was given the right way. You have to learn how to work through those kind of things and then do that to make decisions. And then lastly, obviously, I've lived and worked in California, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and down in Oregon. It's very challenging to live in a place where you can go for months and not see the environment, or find a restaurant that has the food that you love to eat, or even have the seasons and stuff you want to make around the holidays. And I think as leaders, depending on where you are, you have to remember that on the personal level, you have to be just as comfortable in your personal space that you are in your professional space too. Because if you're not at a certain comfort level, both personally and professionally, something is going to suck, either on the personal side or the professional side.
I'm going to ask one follow-up question and see if this microphone helps some of our online folks as well. We're going to give this a chance to see if this helps. As Chief of Police and Commissioner, how do you balance the political pressures between labor unions, the public, media, et cetera? I'm going to pass this down.
You have to know where you stand before you even sit in the seat. So it's not something that you're determining as you go, right? I don't like to use the word line in the sand because as leaders, we have to be very flexible. I remember, when I went to Philadelphia, literally, it was the beginning of 2020, and that's when everything happened simultaneously, once in a professional lifetime, all happened at once. So all my plans, first 100 days, all that went out the door because you're in full triage mode.
How do you balance the political pressures?
That's what I'm saying. So this is why it's important, why I say that. See, that happens that quickly. I already knew who I was when I got there. And when I interviewed, I made very clear, listen, this is what you're hiring me to do. Obviously, there's some flexibility that will have to be present, but you all know what your moral values are. You all know what your capabilities are. I'm big on, I don't know what I don't know. And I am relying on my team that I build your expertise. You've been here, you have institutional knowledge. I was hired for this. We're all going to do this together. But when you don't level set and manage expectations up front, I think that's when you start to see some problems. I've worked with labor unions my entire career. It wasn't only until I became a police chief that I was not represented. So I'm not anti-union. But what I like to do is meet with labor as soon as I start and say, listen, I'm pretty easy. Only thing I don't like is to be blindsided, and I'm certain that's, the same for you. If something is coming down the pipe, I'm gonna give you a heads up, or somebody on the team is gonna give you a heads up. Because I don't want to read in the paper how messed up I am, or how messed up I'm doing really well. How effed up the decision was, they didn't talk to me first, or I wasn't included in the policy decision, or whatever it is. That's not my style, but I also make it very clear that I have a job to do. My interests are not just in membership as it is with labor, membership only, but it's internal communities, external communities, legislators. We all have bosses, right? So I think level setting and setting expectations, once you know that it's coming and it's there, it is what it is, right? And I slept very well at night because I didn't make decisions for personal gain. I did it for what I thought was for the best of the organization or the communities that I worked in.
We're going to do the microphone shuffle here. Thank you, Commissioner. While you currently, so I'm going to pivot now to Bill Humphrey. While you're currently serving as the Director of Security for the Jewish Federation of Dallas, you served the first part of your career with Dallas PD, retiring as the Deputy Chief. While I know you've handled many critical incidents, can you tell us a bit about July 7, 2016? Tell us a little bit about what made the decisions you had to make that day so difficult, a little bit about the incident itself.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My current role is Director of Security for the Jewish Federation, basically anything in North Texas, the Jewish synagogue schools, whatever, we would make sure the security protocols are where they need to be. Prior to the Federation, I spent 37 years with the Dallas Police Department. I literally came out of college at Baylor University, straight into law enforcement, so I never did anything else. During my 37 years, I spent a lot of different roles, but the purpose of today, my final role as Deputy Chief was overall the Special Operations Groups. So July 7th, 2016, I think you all know most of the story. 5 officers killed, 12 other citizens wounded. On an evening that nobody expected that type of tragedy because we had a very organized, pre-planned Black Lives Matter rally with about 1,800 demonstrators. Very cooperative. They started at 6 o'clock for a rally event in the heart of downtown Dallas in a green space that's common for demonstrations. They spent about an hour or so at that spot, and then they began a march through downtown. It wasn't until about the end of that march, and of course with 1,800 demonstrators, it took quite a while to get from the east side of downtown Dallas to the west side. But towards the end of that demonstration, that march, A man named Michael Johnson showed up, had nothing to do with the rally, nothing to do with the demonstration. But Micah had, you know, through his manifestos, he had a plan to kill as many police officers as possible. He'd been planning this for some time, and when he saw the rally going on downtown, he knew there would be a lot of police officers out in the open, out in the streets. So he thought that was his moment to take advantage. So I can't go through the whole story today, we don't have time, but I do want to go through 2 or 3 key highlights for critical command. And I know many of you have been in those roles with command critical incident scenes. Certainly, if you have prior military experience, you understand the dynamics of live engagement. So I just want to share a couple of my thoughts of what was going through my mind during that incident. I hope it's helpful. When that rally started, I was the on-scene commander for the rally, for the demonstration. And it was very peaceful, it was going fine. We had a command post set up in the field about 4 or 5 blocks. 6:30 kicks off, rally's going well. Everything was going fine up until 9:01. And 9:01 is when we heard the first shots fired, shots fired. And the next thing we hear is officer down, officer down. As you can imagine, the course, the dynamics of that whole evening immediately changed. So I had to ask myself, as the on-scene commander for what would have been a peaceful demonstration, what is my role? And I'm not talking about titles. Your title is police chief or commander or lieutenant or sergeant, whatever your title is, you know what your job description is. That's not what we're talking about here. When a critical incident happens and everything hits the fan, you have to ask yourself, what is my role right now? In this very minute, what is my next step? What is my next decision? Where do I go from here? I would leave that field command post for the demonstration. I would advance up to within a block of where the shots were fired and establish an immediate tactical command post because now we're in full tactical operations. With the assistance of other commanders, lieutenants, majors, different folks, we made a lot of early decisions. But what we knew within minutes was we had 5 officers shot. We didn't know the conditions at that moment, but the calls kept coming, shooting here, shooting there, person down, multiple people shot. The 911 calls was nonstop. Another interesting dynamic in all this is the media was already embedded. So the media was already there for the demonstration. When the shots rang out, the media is scrambled. They're jumping behind cars and parking garages or wherever they can find cover, but they're trying to get their video. They're trying to do what they do as journalists. So that played a critical dynamic in all this. And as the minutes would roll by, you just heard all the chaos on the radio. I know if you've been in law enforcement for an amount of time, you know what that chaos sounds like. And it was officers screaming, begging for help, begging for ambulances. There were no ambulances. The fire department's not coming. They can't come because it's a, so they're not coming to get your officers. They're not coming to get these citizens. So, you know, there's some things that happen in critical incidents. As a commander, you don't have to command. You don't have to tell people what to do. They know what to do. Our officers immediately started evacuating the officers that were shot. They started loading in squad cars. In one particular incident, one of our female officers, she gets the officer in the back of her squad car. Off she goes to the hospital. What she didn't realize was those front tires were shot out. She running on limbs for about 3 miles to get into the hospital, and she did. Response teams. I didn't tell response teams to go out to do response, do your thing. They just formed up. They started because the problem was we're in the core downtown Dallas, and in any major city, you all know, every building is steel, glass, and concrete. So one gunshot sounds like 20. One gunshot in one corner sounds like it came from 10 corners away. So we didn't know where the shooter was. It was mass chaos. What was my role? That's kind of what ticked into my head. Was set up. I started identifying my resources, but my role in that moment was to stop that shooter. I didn't know where he was. And you can even hear on the way the officer screaming, we have an elevated shooter, we don't know where he's at. So this would go on for several minutes. And about 20 minutes into this, we realized we have a known shooter Yeah, the El Central Community College, which was right there where the shooting started. After he shot the first three officers in an intersection, the fourth officer actually sees him, engages him. They're in a gunfight. Brett would not survive the gunfight. Shooter would survive the gunfight, but he was shot. And he left a considerable blood trail in that location into the school. We were able to get our tactical teams in there quickly. They went into the school, they engaged him. He was locked into a corner. Just prior to the TAC teams engaging him though, when he got to the end of his hallway, it had a large pane glass window that looked out into the street, and he saw officers gathering in the street. He would shoot the window out, and shoot Michael Smith, the fifth officer on the street. But at that point, the tactical officers were on the floor with him, they engaged him in a gunfight. He would tuck into a little alcove in the school, and for the next 3 hours, we would talk, we would try to negotiate, we had a negotiator on the floor. He would talk for a while, he would shoot for a while. We would talk for a while, we would shoot for a while. This went on for 3 hours. Well, while all this was going on inside the school, on the outside, the dynamic was, we're trying to figure out where are these other shooters. And the calls just kept coming in. There's a shooting at the Omni Hotel. The Omni Hotel was like 10 blocks away. There's a shooting in the lobby of the hotel. Officers were responding at the Omni Hotel. There was no shooting in the Omni. So the misinformation, the disinformation, and again, what's going through my mind is, I'm trying to remember the time of the situation, with all the disinformation and misinformation that was coming in, and that was a huge part of that evening. So I will just tell you that, from a learning point, no matter what your experience level is, no matter what your education level is, you will be challenged, beyond what you're comfortable with. Education, been to all the senior management schools, but there was no playbook that said, when 5 of your officers are killed within 7 minutes, 12 more citizens are gunned down. And the 1,800 demonstrators that were there, most of them saw what was going on and said, I'm done, I'm out. But you know what? About 200 of them stayed. And they didn't care that 5 officers had been killed. And they didn't care that even some of their demonstrator crews had been shot. They still wanted to engage in the demonstration. So we're dealing with that. You know, Texas is an open carry state. So if you do a demonstration in Texas, you can bring your rifle for the demonstration. Well, when the shooting started, we're trying to figure out who the bad guys are, and there were demonstrators, you know, with 15 rifles, and we don't know who did the shooting. But we did know we had people's rifles that we couldn't allow to stay on the streets, and we put them in handcuffs and took the rifles away. That didn't go well later, but that was part of the deal. So a lot of dynamics, fire department's not coming in. We have to self-evacuate everybody. We're in this gunfight inside the school, it's still ongoing. Media everywhere we're trying to clear out. So again, my thought process, right down the road, identify the shooter, let's work on this shooter. So we just started gridding out the blocks. I would take 2 or 3 blocks, call the grid, send response teams, this is your goal. Scour, back down to that grid and hold that grid. And in that moment of chaos, because I know that chaos, I know that a lot of
Here's gonna handle it more diplomatically than you think you're gonna find.
those should come for one small opening. I just need one small opening to make sense of the chaos. There's some order to that chaos. And starting to establish grids, starting to establish perimeters, and put a perimeter on the school immediately, make sure the school is evacuated. We're just starting to work into a little by little. So, you know, 2 hours into this, we now have everybody evacuated, everybody's in hospitals. We have our grids established, we have our blocks established, we have response teams holding what we have. We had every support agency you could imagine show up in downtown Dallas. Every federal agency was there. every police agency from as far away as you could count showed up. In Texas, our parks and wildlife, we had Texas game wardens. I had a whole cadre of Texas game wardens. And honestly, I didn't know what to do with game wardens, but I found a role for them. So there was always just different dynamics that people wanted to come, people wanted to help. We had 300 just Dallas police officers. So what do you do with 300 Dallas police officers in a 4 or 5 block crime scene? So a lot of different dynamics played out. But to put an end to the shooter, we went through all the tactical scenarios. Run the whole list of tactical logs. Did that. They worked in this instance, no, they would not. How are we going to end this? We have to end this. And he's made it clear through the negotiations that he has no intentions of walking out of school. All of his intentions were to kill as many more police officers as he could. He told us he had bombs. That was part of the dynamic of how we could respond. We believed he had bombs with him. He didn't, but we believed he did at the time. And so, ultimately, you know the story and the history of how that ended. We did deploy a robot with an explosive ordnance, and we put an end to that, and that ended that scene. That even though the shooter was deceased and taken out, the scene's not over. We have 5 deceased officers in hospitals, 2 different hospitals. Bringing the families in, bringing the support in. And I have pictures of officers just, weeping and crying and just really broken down, even though the incident is over, it's really not over. And we would go through the next 8 days burying 5 officers, and y'all know what police unions look like. But to have 5 of them back and back to back to back, and to be able to support those families, which to this day we did, was critical. So again, as an incident commander, through every step of that scene, I had to ask myself, what's my role here? What's next? We got to get a bad guy. We got to take control of the scene. We got to set parameters. We did all that. Now we got to figure out how we can end this bad guy. So we figured that out, and we did that. Now he's done. Now we got a crime scene. How do you manage a 6-block crime scene in the core of a major city when businesses such as Bank of America, a 52-story building, is in that crime scene, and it's closed down for weeks. So managing that crime scene, but again, federal partners, FBI, PA, they're all there. Made a huge difference to that. We buried our officers. We had the support of the community. But as an incident commander, I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. What is your role when it all hits the fan? And how do we get that role in the best way possible? Can you detonate somebody with explosive ordnance? And that thought went through my mind because, Texas law, Chapter 9 of the penal code, somebody shooting at you trying to take your life or life of another, you can, utilize deadly force. Could you detonate? I didn't answer that question, but I knew I had to. That's how we did it. You will be challenged for whatever you're trained for. You have to understand your obstacle in the midst of misinformation and bad information. And that was a huge challenge for that night. You have to be deliberate in your actions. I felt like once we decided to end that the way we ended it, there was no going back, there was no deliberating, what about this, what about that. It was, yes, this is our plan, yes, this is what we're going to do, it's how we're going to do it. Be very deliberate in that action. And the last one I just want to leave you, and I'll close with this and pass it back to you, Ben, is, as a tactical commander and as an incident commander for that scene, my tactical sergeants are in that gunfight talking to me saying, "Boss, this is what we're going to do, this is what we need to do. We have robots, we have explosive ordinances, we've been trained with that stuff for years. This is how we're going to do it." As an incident commander, you have to understand that gap and go, okay, my role now is really that decision maker, and let's move forward. Let's put them into this. And so I had to let the subordinates, I had to let tactical operators, I had to let tactical sergeants do their jobs. And as a commander, I had to be confident that my troops knew what they could. And when I said we want to work with this plan, the plan is going to work because I had confidence in them. And I would just say, let your subordinates do their jobs. If you're in a commanding role, be a commander, stay in your role. That's what I had to keep asking myself, what is my role in this? Make sure I was clear on that and to stay in my role. Because look, as a former, I was a tactical operator in my younger years. A big part of me wanted to go grab, put on a heavy vest, grab my rifle and go to the gunfight, but that wasn't my role as a commander. So you have to know your role, you have to stay in your lane, let your folks do what they do. That's what
Thank you. I'm gonna try this microphone so we can maybe get two in service here. Thank you, Bill, and thank you for sharing that story and just the trials and tribulations that you went through with that piece. Want to pivot now back here, home in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Lieutenant Neil Johnson with the Virginia State Police and we here at the Center for Public Safety and Justice have an amazing relationship with the VSP. Currently, the cohort of North Van College is our 20th year, so we're very pleased to have you represent on this panel. Can you talk to us a little bit about here locally, how you can lead teams with the state police to prepare for large demonstrations and incidents? And maybe what are the single most difficult incidents you've led the response to and why? Talk to us a little bit about planning and preparation and how you take resources of the statewide agency, many of which are hours and hours away to prepare for large demonstrations. And it sounds like a 20-part question, so good luck.
Good afternoon. First off, I appreciate you letting me go third after both of them. This could be hard to follow up on. I think they both done in their esteemed careers. So, good afternoon, Neil Johnson, Virginia State Police. I'm currently the lieutenant up in Northern Virginia. So we have 7 divisions, and I am essentially the assistant division commander for the Northern Virginia Barrack, or Northern Virginia Troop, for all intents and purposes. I'm also serving as the tactical field force coordinator, training coordinator. So we do a lot of stuff with planning our public order, our civil disturbance teams around the state. And I would say that one thing that we do in preparation is after Unite the Right One, which was 2017, coming in there, I think, we realized that we did not have enough people on our public order teams to substantiate like multi-operation periods. So as far as I know, we were one of the first large state agencies in the nation. We went to training all members, all sworn members, all uniform members are now trained in public order. So they have that civil disturbance training. They have what we call our tactical field force. And that allows us, we have a good consistency of training across the state. We have trainers, and user trainers across the whole state. So when we do get deployed for anything, we could be, unlike a locality, we could be grabbing people from Charlottesville, Northern Virginia, Tidewater, and we can essentially bring them all together like like a Frankenstein monster, and we put all the pieces together and they all know how to work in unison. So, and so we take a lot of pride in that. And then, so we train routinely, we train consistently, and we don't make it overly complicated. Okay, these are ground level run troopers. We kind of plug and play them. They know what they need to do. They go out there, and we let them and the first line supervisors, kind of do what it is that's important to them. So your second part was asking about an incident, like a complex incident or a crisis that we had to go to. So as both of you were talking, I was kind of reflecting on that question that Bennett did ask. And for me, one of which probably the most difficult instance for me was when I was making a transition from first line supervisor, who's a platoon sergeant, who's kind of like in charge of his people, and he's there and he's he's kind of like in the grit of it. If there's a riot or public demonstration or something, and I was now a lieutenant, and it's hard for me to transition from that and allow my people to kind of just do what they need to do. So we were at it was May 20th, or May 30th down in Manassas, post George Floyd, and we had staged 70 troopers to support the locality down there. Anyway, things kind of got off the rails quick with the protests. They overtook an intersection. The localities panicked. They called for us to come out, and as most of you all know, those protests were very, they were protesting us, right? They were protesting a lot of things, but they were protesting police. And when they saw 70 cruisers with their blue lights roll in, that kind of brought the crowd a little bit. So it became a very violent interaction, probably the most violent one I've been involved with up until recently, in the Capitol. So I had to step back, and I was worried about all my troopers, but I had to be that coordination piece between unified command and then the street level. And that was where I had a lot of difficulty ensuring that all my people were, I was used to going up and engaging with them and making sure they were good, making sure they had everything they needed. And I had to put my trust in our training and everything to ensure that those that have come up behind me were able to do that. So another little aspect to that day was when we worked, I think this is part of the other questions, so if I'm getting ahead, I apologize. When we work with localities as a state agency, we kind of come in and we augment their manpower, right? We are an addition manpower footprint for them for their operational period. Lead support agency in the state. So we can bring a lot of people to an incident very quickly and, help squash it, hopefully, or help bring order back to something that's going, awry. So for that one in Manassas, what had happened is, this is kind of reflecting on the importance of what a unified command is and who should be in it. You should not have the mayor of your city in the unified command with your, commander and with your police chief in there. You should not have the board of supervisors in there.
Good luck.
So what's fun, but what's good about our agency is we do not answer to the mayor or to the board. We answer to our governor, our secretaries of public safety. So we essentially were able to kind of like take the lead in that incident there, because what needed to happen, the board and the mayor was not going to happen there. So we were able to take over that incident. But it was very violent. A lot of troopers were hit. It was stones, landscape rocks. It was just like, it was one of the first ones I ever felt like helpless because of that, like, breakdown of communication and not being able to convey to them what needed to occur for this resolution to happen.
Thank you. I'm now going to do some rapid questions. And so thank you all for kind of the detail in these. I'm going to come back to Commissioner Allen. And so I'm going to put you a bit on the spot here and ask you to reflect on your career today. Is there a single incident that might stand out to you as really challenging to navigate, and why? And we'll start there.
So a single incident, there's been a few, but if I look at them collectively, I would think it's just the grief, trauma, and loss, right? So over a very short period of time. So I didn't go into this part because we really didn't have a lot of time to go into. You're more than welcome to ask questions in Q&A. But 2020, so I left Portland, Oregon at the end of 2019, arrived in Philadelphia at the very beginning of 2020. Within 3 weeks, one of our corporals was ambushed and murdered. Same thing, obviously, but you get my point. Then within days, there was a thing called COVID. And going back to the differences of, where you are regionally, Brooklyn, Oregon had a lot of money. There's a lot of technology. It's Silicon Valley of the Pacific Northwest. You come to Philadelphia, at the time it was the sixth largest city in the country, we had the fourth largest police department in the country, but the city itself is also one of the most poor, right? So resources aren't really readily available. So we were fighting for PPE. I remember the Phillies got their uniform material and made masks for us, right? I mean, there wasn't technology. Comcast was headquartered in Philadelphia, but there was an assumption that everyone had access to Wi-Fi. There was an assumption that I can get in front of a camera like this and live stream. There was an assumption that the kids who were now not in school because the schools were closed had Wi-Fi to continue to go to school. A lot of the children were relying upon going to school to eat. So all these things were happening at once. Officers were getting sick. We did not publicize how many officers were out. It was hundreds. And I can recall, and crime is going up, right? And then there's the murder of George Floyd. Then we had our own critical incident. The streets are literally on fire. There's police cars being set on fire and pushed into crowds of police officers. My introduction to the hospitals in Philadelphia were the trauma bays because I was rushing to meet and see the officers that were either assaulted, shot, and their families, right? And I can recall, while I was in Portland, ICP, this is the point of reference, ICP was in Chicago at the time. I had to fly back to Portland because there was a line of duty death. This was my first time as a new chief to present the flag to a family member. And the mom was the matriarch. She was so strong. When I showed up there, she was asking us, what do you need? What do you need? And she made me feel better, right? Until it came time for me to present the flag to her, and her bottom lip started to quiver, and I almost lost it. And whatever it was I was supposed to say, it didn't come out like it was supposed to come out. But I extended my heartfelt condolences to her. I share this because I walked away from that. I got back on the plane in Chicago. And I said, Lord, please don't ever, 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 ever let me have to do that again. Please. And then 2020 happened. And we lost so many officers. And I found myself presenting so many flags and meeting with so many families. You're not trained for that, right? Either you're a compassionate person or you're not. As a leader, you could not go. You could not go to family's house. You could, read off of whatever and eulogize and do whatever and keep it moving. But that's just not who I am. I showed up to hospitals when, 6-year-olds mistakenly shot and killed their 5-year-old. I went to that kind of stuff. So I would say there isn't one particular incident, but when you get so involved with you care, it's the combined, the collective trauma and loss being felt in the community, but also internally that we all felt. That was one of the most challenging things and I'm still working through it. I think as human beings, we all have to acknowledge in these roles, this is something that we have to do.
I want to stay with you for just 1 second. So you just brought up something that I've heard you describe before, and that's being present. Can you share just briefly your approach to leadership and how you build trust by doing that? What your lesson would be to future leaders that are watching it about what presence means?
I'm trying to be succinct, but these questions are not re-answered questions, but I will do my best. So we all know visibility is important, but I'll tell you this from my experience as an outsider. So I have the benefit, I was given the benefit of the doubt or not, right? Growing up in the Oakland Police Department 20 years or whatever, people knew me. You grow up with folks, you see them get married, have kids or whatever. You see the promotions, you see where they work, all these things. When you leave as a new leader in a new organization, you don't have the benefit of the doubt. They don't know who you are. You may, I made a phone call, I went to ADI with such and such, they said you cool or not, right? But chances are you're starting from scratch. So when I came in as a baby police chief in Portland, Oregon, I spent 7 months on the ground, internally, externally, roll calls, community meetings, all the stakeholders, getting to know who these individuals are, but then also making sure that I was visible because they didn't know who I was. And I did not want to give them the opportunity to form their own narrative well, she's kind of standoffish or, whatever it is, because I think the interactions really give an opportunity to show what someone's leadership style is, not just in the types of policy decisions that you make. It's, the interpersonal skills and all the things that come with meeting someone in person. Fast forward to Philadelphia, all the stuff I just described to you, 2020, right? All those warm touch points, gone, gone. I was an outsider. Philadelphia is very parochial. It takes about a good 17 and a half years, I'm told, to be accepted as a true Philadelphian. I wasn't there that long, right? But I didn't grow up in the police organization. And there was also an assumption that we had technology like we had here or in Portland. We didn't have that. So I was meeting people for the first time, very important people virtually. Imagine what that's like, right? So there's no schools open, there's no community meetings, there's no in-person. So I'm getting hundreds of people in one room, a virtual room, once I finally have technology, and it's not the same. So there were some headlines. Where is she? Where is she? Okay, no, I'm right here. But because, and it's a larger city, it's a larger, we're talking, at the time when I first got there, we were authorized for a lot of sworn officers there. The number just dwindled. But that's a lot of people to connect with. So the chances of hitting every lineup or every roll call, it's just not going to happen. So visibility is extremely important, but at some point, again, remember as an outsider, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. So me saying, I have a very competent team early on, and when you see them, you see me, that does not fly, right? It's going to take some months and sometimes a full year like it did for me to say, oh, she is out here. And then the other thing, and I'll wrap this up. I was very uncomfortable with taking a picture and posting it. But the larger the organization, the larger the community, if it's not a photo, it's not posted somewhere nowadays on social media, it didn't happen. You weren't there. So it's almost like, in order to get credit, which is very unfortunate, you have to document these things and show proof that you were there, because that's what people nowadays expect. So if you're an introvert or you just don't go, I thought it was fake. I didn't like having cameras around me when I got out and just hopped in the car with district captains and said, show me what your areas are that need assistance. I already knew the answers to the questions, but I wanted to know that they knew. I didn't like having somebody with a camera in the back seat. I couldn't stand it. But it wasn't until I started bringing my comms team with me that I started to get benefit of that.
Thank you. Bill, coming back to you here. So just taking a brief moment to reflect on the story that you just led us through. And this is going to be in the category of simple questions as well. For future leaders that are listening, how would someone start preparing to lead through something like what you experienced on July 7th?
Yes, it's a great question, and I would just tell you, for me, there were three main things. Number one, what you are doing today is checking one of those boxes, and it's education. Continue your education in leadership, continue your education in study in major incidents, and ask yourself that question, your moral code, is that something you can lead through? And educational piece to that is very, very important. The second thing is mentorship. If you don't already have mentors, and it doesn't matter whether you're a troop or a sergeant or lieutenant or you're the chief of police, you should be having mentors, not necessarily even within your own organization or your own city. Go outside the city, go outside the state, find people that are doing roles that either you're in or you want to be in, and find those mentors and pick their brains about, well, what would you do if, and what would happen if, and talk to them and stand that connection, because that mentorship is a key piece. And I'll just tell you, I thought it was very, very interesting, because I was going to make these notes this morning about having a mentor. At 8:30 this morning when I was having breakfast, one of my mentors, a former chief in Dallas, he went on to be a chief in Phoenix, Arizona. He calls me, and he was calling me just to talk about some program that I'm doing in a couple of months. And I told him, I said, it's interesting that you call me right now, because I'm thinking to go in and talk to law enforcement officials about, different things. But one of those points is that mentorship piece. So have mentors. They don't necessarily have to be in law enforcement. They can be in other areas, but whatever your role is, whatever you aspire to be, whether it is the chief of police or the sheriff or whatever, have those mentors that you can go to and you can lean on. And just that third area is you know, your own self, to thy own self be true. If you're aspiring to be the chief of police, you're aspiring to be the sheriff, or you just want to be a sergeant or lieutenant, know your own capabilities in those leadership dynamics. Have that educational support behind you, have that education piece behind you, because, you know, I come from the spiritual life, I'm a spiritual person. I believe I was called into my role as a law enforcement officer. I believe I was called into my role throughout my life. So if you are a person of faith, I would strongly lean on that piece of faith to know where you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to plan, and how you're supposed to get to where you need to be as a leader.
Thank you. If you don't tell your story, someone else will tell it for you. Crises like Unite the Right, Virginia Tech Trainings, others are demonstrating how critical crisis communication is. Question for Neil here: if you can talk to us a little bit about how BSP, how you thought about consistent their messaging in moments of chaos, and what is your approach for BSP towards things like that?
So for us, it all comes down to the planning. For pre-planned events, I think we do an excellent job. For the ones that pop up and everything, we're going to fall on the backs of things that we've done in the past previously, when other people have learned from prior events. So the messaging usually takes place prior to an incident or an event, and consistent messaging throughout all the chain of command, through all different lines of supervisory, people who will be on the scene is paramount. Anytime any of that falters, the whole operation can be jeopardized. That actually was one of the things that occurred during the first Charlottesville. Is, you know, we had people who took it upon themselves just to kind of veer away from what was established into an operational plan, in which an operational plan or an IEP, everybody is part of, everybody contributes, all the people that are on the ground contribute to. So as far as getting information out then after an event or everything, I think just working with your public information officers, people who can get the right messaging out to the public, kind to abate their fears, abate any worries and everything like that. And also local state partners, BDM, Virginia Department of Emergency Managers, they're very good at pushing information out to the public, BDOT, you know, any other stakeholders that could be involved in something.
Thank you. We're going to be coming to questions from the audience momentarily, and so please take this moment if you have any questions for our panel members. For those online, please use the Q&A form and place those in there, and we'll start getting those questions teed up. And for those in the room, if you have questions, start thinking about those, and we'll call upon you. I just want to ask, you know, you've all talked about various different challenging circumstances. How do you personally recover from the pressures of leading under these circumstances? What do you do to keep yourself healthy, sane, and I'll open it up to whoever would like to.
Sure. I want to address what I think is one of the most important topics in law enforcement today. Certainly there are challenges, there are issues. We know law enforcement dynamics have changed, but I think one of the most important topics in law enforcement right now is mental health and the recovery of the incident. And when I talked about July 7th, I will just tell you that incident is not over for a lot of folks. And we won't really know when that incident is over because we've lost officers through suicide, we've lost officers, we've lost their careers through arrest. Was it because of July 7th? We don't know. They know. But I will just tell you, if you've been through a traumatic incident and with, you know, a room this size and a home the odds are great that many of you have been through traumatic incidents. And your brain will only process that to a degree. And in law enforcement, and I'll just speak from personal experience, you know, when I was raised up in law enforcement, the way we dealt with traumatic situations is you went to the bar, you got with your buddies, you had a safety party, and you talked about the incidents, and it was assumed that that was the way you fixed it and you moved on. And maybe some of that was fixed, but I would speculate to say a lot of it wasn't. And your brain doesn't forget. It doesn't forget. And it starts to stack those traumas over and over and over. Now, there's all kinds of BEP, employee assistant programs out there. There's all kinds of great counseling programs out there. But you know what I've seen in law enforcement, and I'm speaking for me. I won't paint a broad brush, but what I've experienced is, as cops especially, we're not going to ask for help. We're not going to say, you know, geez, I'm going through a tough time, can you work it? We don't do that very good. So some do it good, but not always do it very good. So there's a lot of programs out there. So I just want to say I think it's a critical point in law enforcement. It's still personal to me because I have my own traumas I have to work through. I'm proud to say my wife and I have been through counseling, and that got us through a lot of issues. I'm proud to say that through my spiritual beliefs and my prayer time, getting into the majority of that. But those traumatic incidents, if you haven't experienced, you know people around you that have, your officers experience, the emotional health critical to law enforcement today, and I'm glad that it's out there. It's being talked about, but it has to be something that has to be put in the priority of how we take care of our officers, and we have to do a much better job of that. In the interest of full disclosure, I'll tell you, a colleague of mine just released a book called Checkpoints. It's on Amazon. What Checkpoints talks about is when officers go through trauma. You know, as a fellow officer, an officer answered a traumatic, scene, like a child was killed, or a horrific major accident, or a really terrible shooting scene. Somebody in the organization, it doesn't need to be the chief or a gold badge, it needs to be the troop, somebody they respect, calls them up and says, hey, John, I know you had to deal with that call yesterday, I know you had to deal with that shooting, or maybe it's an OIS situation. We have to deal with that. Let's just talk about it. Tell me what your thoughts are. And if that officer is processing and going through, or has access to that, that's a great thing. But if they don't, we need to connect them to a resource, whether it's a counselor, whether it's a pastor, a priest, or rabbi, somebody that can walk them through that. So mental health, mental wellness, I think, is a critical point in law enforcement today, and I think we need to focus on that. And again, it's personal knowledge because I'm going through it, I've been there, but I also have a 29-year-old who's a Dallas police officer. And I did not want him to go into that profession because I did not want him to see what I have seen and deal with what I have dealt with. But that was what he chose, and that's where he's at. So it is personal, and I keep counseling him. I keep safe and sound. But mental wellness, mental health, checkpoints is just another way to get us there. It's a great book, it needs to read, but whatever you do for your organization, make sure you're healthy, your officers are healthy, and there's some senior folks in this room. Look back at your own careers and make sure you're healthy and you're processing those traumatic moments.
That's the right person.
Yeah, that was great.
I want to open up to questions, and I know we have a few coming in online. So the first question that we have, and I'll kind of bounce back and forth, so if you have a question in the room, just give me a nod, and I'll come to you in a second. But starting with one question that came in online regarding EAPs, how can agencies remove taboo or stigma related to agency services? Commissioner, would you be willing?
So one of my proudest moments before I left as a deputy chief in Oakland was creating a wellness unit and actually hiring and working with the union to hire and train psychologists, train therapists, to run it. But, make sure that we had a shared calendar where sworn and civilian alike, and professional staff alike can go online and on the internet and say, listen, on this day, we have a brown bag on this topic, and so whatever it is, right? So something constantly there, but it was all confidential. And then fast forwarding to another agency, learning and having those communication channels open so I could actually learn, and that what some commanders were doing when their officers or their team asked for time to go see someone, they would penalize them. And had I not had those open doors of communication, I would have never known. So we had things called healing circles after the protests in 2020. We're playing clothes, we're off site, and we're like, hey, just tell me, what are you feeling right now? Some people, they thought it was too touchy-feely. Some people thought it was great. You did it with your teams, because you were pretty much on a skirmish line with the people you work with. But it had to be made very clear to the leadership team that when someone taps out and says, I want to go see EAP, that they're fully supported, whether I personally believe in it or not, right? You have to ensure that they're supported to do that and allow them the time to do that on the job. And then if you don't have an EAP team or a program in place at all, there's so many agencies that do. You can go grab their policies, you can go check them out. We did this, when I was in Oakland, we were also experiencing some suicides. Go to other agencies and see what their peer support program looks like. Or if you don't have a peer support program, who you can call in and contract to come in and work with your people. The bottom line is you have to have that resource there. You cannot penalize people for utilizing it. And then you make sure that you're benchmarking with or against other agencies to ensure that what you're doing is best practices.
I'm going to take a moment and do a shameless plug for some of the work at the Center for Public Safety and Justice. We're working on concepts around mental health and EAPs. My background with Metropolitan Police, the EAP was actually separate from the police department, funded by the police union. So there's some very interesting models that are out there for those to look at. I want to open up to questions in the room and see if anyone has a question they'd like to ask. I see a question in the back, please. And if you can say it real loudly so our guests online can hear, and I might rephrase.
Yes, my name is Dr. Odom. I'm a professor at the University of Virginia. A question to the panel on their thoughts. When it comes to EAP, I think it's great because this is 21st century policing. However, as stated before by one of the panelists, well, a few of you, that there are penalties in some agencies when you do that, but then also we have to worry about the public. First of all, would you take somebody on your SWAT team that had these different types of trauma? Second, if they were involved in the shooting in the public, and then when they subpoena the records legally, they're going to get the records to see that this person had this type of issue. And then from previous lawsuits, the questions become, how did you allow that officer to go in that special unit or be back on patrol, get involved with a shooting, and now the department is being sued and also the officer personally. So what can we do, or what should we do to try to address those issues?
Pretty straightforward 12-part question.
No, I would love to point out, that we all understand that it's a changing era in law enforcement where, in my day, nobody could look at my background investigations or my personnel file, it was all sealed, nobody could get it. There's nothing changed that we live in anymore. Somebody can get those records. Look, I think we're living in a different environment in 2025 where law enforcement officers, maybe for the first time ever, are being seen as real people, and they have real issues and real challenges. And to the point that an officer did go through a traumatic scenario, but was willing to stand up and say, I need help, and find that professional help and go through the steps and go through whatever necessary treatments to get them back on track to where they have a solid mental health perspective, a mental wellness, if you will. And you may have to legitimately assess whatever role they're going to be put back into, but maybe they need to be put back in that role. And maybe they will function perfectly fine in that role. So I don't think we shy away from that. I think we address it. I think we provide the mental wellness that they all need. And we move forward. We don't shy away from it.
I'll just add 2 cents, having worked in 2 departments under consent decrees. Make it the same for everybody, so one person isn't singled out. If your policy states that within 48 hours of an officer involved shooting, you shall go see someone, for a fit for duty assessment, everybody gets it. So there is no, oh, you went to go see there is none of that, right? So I would just say internalize that within the organization, make it into the culture of the organization through policy, and it removes a lot of that stigma. We found that to be helpful.
Thank you. Other questions? Please.
Yeah, I'll let you know. So go, you're flowing from here to a very deep question. That decision stopped with you, or did you have to sell that at higher? If you did have to sell it higher, we talk about those conversations. What are any repercussions? Okay, I just want to be clear, you're talking about decision to get the license. It's a great question. There is a book, Chief Brown, David Brown's the chief of police at the time, he wrote a book about it, so you can read it firsthand if you'd like. So in my discussions with my tactical operators, how are we gonna end this? We go through the whole litany of, typical tactical options. Can you put a sniper on it? No. Is gas an option? No. Is this an option? No. We go through the whole litany. Is the robot an option? Absolutely. The robots we use, we train them to shoot rifles, we train them to shoot shotguns. So we're thinking, well, we use the robots and the robot down there, let the robot shoot. Well, the robot's not agile enough in a small hallway. So now the math comes into play. How long the hallway, how long's the agility of the robot, all that sort of stuff. So then we talk about using an explosive ordnance. Then again, you're talking about the math. Shape charges, overpressure, underpressure, all that stuff the EOD folks know well. So those were the discussions. And ultimately, I didn't think long to say, let's move forward, let's do this. In fact, my question was, how long is this going to take? We have to put it into this. And we knew through intelligence, we knew through the discussions that if we didn't put it into this soon, there were going to be more dead officers, there were going to be more dead civilians. Because he had full intent to continue his operations. We truly believe he had pipe bombs. He didn't, but at the time, we thought that he did. So that discussion was to say, let's do this. And I'll just tell you, in the book, when I called Chief Brown and said, this is how we're ending this, there was a pause. The chiefs in the room, you can imagine that kind of conversation with his lieutenant commander. We're going to put, a detonation charge on the robot. We're going to send the robot down the hall. We're going to end this. His only question to me at that time, there was a pause in the conversation, was how long will it take? Then that's what about this, what about that? And, as commanders, and take on those roles and do all this as a commander, and look, for any sergeants or lieutenants that may be out there listening to this, smaller towns, you might be the incident commander. It doesn't have to be a chief or a chief or a sheriff. It could be a lower rank, but once you assume that role as incident commander, you have to make those decisions. And you have to dedicate those decisions, and you have to stand by it. Now, look, we all know those thoughts are going to race through your head. Job. Might not be sued. Will the critics come out of the woodwork and just, rip us apart for this decision? Absolutely. All those things are going through your head. But, in that moment, the officers, 12 civilians fighting for their lives. I have to end this incident. And so, yes, my decision was, let's move forward, let's put into this. Did that answer your question?
Yes, great. Other questions? Please.
Yeah, I've got a question for Commissioner Outlaw. You mentioned going into new communities and sort of having, not having relationships pre-existing there. I wonder if you could talk to your experience on developing those critical relationships with the community and what strategies may have been helpful to you, and how did those relationships then, help during critical incidents and shape your response?
That's a really good question, and thank you for that. And because we didn't have as much time before, I didn't go into detail with that. I'll go back to Portland and Philadelphia. So in Portland, before I started the job, I asked the administration, my boss was the police commissioner because the way the form of government at the time. So the mayor is the mayor and also the police commissioner, either my boss. Asked him, who are the influential stakeholders before I even got there that I need to meet with internally within the organization, but also in the community. Please have someone arrange those meetings so I can hit the ground running. And I looked out there and that it was dead on with the individuals that I needed to meet with, the individuals with groups, right? Fast forward to the next place, I didn't really have that same on-the-way. And so it ended up kind of being piecemeal. And I found myself for the first year amidst dealing with everything else in 2020, when folks were saying, well, where is she? I don't see her. Or, I haven't met with her. I'm like, well, back up. I'm exhausted. I've been meeting with all these people. To find out I was in the right rooms, but not meeting with the most appropriate people. So you have to make sure that you're very clear on who you're meeting with. You also ask, is this the best use of my very valuable time? Because you won't have a lot of it. But it wasn't until I said this, I asked this question, well, who will I know? Who am I supposed to be meeting with then, right? With a person that was influential in the community who said, come on over here, I'll set up some meetings for you. And this was a year in. And I found that I built a kitchen cabinet of trusted advisors because I hadn't gone through the right people then. So I think very early on, you have to identify those influential stakeholders. It's not always going to be the loudest voice in the room, right? It'll sometimes be the small vocal minority that's making the most noise. And so the public may think, or an outsider may think, well, these are people I got to meet with. And it's not. It's typically the individuals that's working from behind the curtain that's moving all the chess pieces, and you got to pay attention to that. And so you're building a kitchen cabinet, early a kitchen cabinet and trusted advisors in the community, but you're also doing that internally in the police department because they're the ones that are going to tell you, no. You got to make sure you meet with this person, right? You got to make sure you meet with this group. These are the most vocal people in my community meetings that are here every month. They bring up the most issues. They will hold me accountable if I don't get this done, right? So it's very intentional and strategic. It's not going to always be the individuals that are quoted in the paper because those folks tend to be the ones that are quoted because they got the camera time and they're not on the ground, right? So once, I will tell you, a key partner in 2020 to get that civil unrest to stop, for things to stop hurting, were partners in the churches. Huge percentage of the community in Philadelphia have some form of spiritual base. And they were on the ground. It was credible messengers. A lot of cops in the country will say, I don't want to work along somebody that has a felony record. I just won't do it. And they'll sit there with their arms crossed. But let me tell you something, I'll do it. And it worked. They don't want to hear from a white shirt. They don't want to see somebody with, whatever on their collar. It's what we represent at that time. So identifying those individuals early on, before you even start, I think is helpful. But maintaining those relationships and meeting with them regularly is also helpful. And then shoot, if you have to, get a Google Voice number. That's what I think that's what I did. But get a Google Voice number because it's a separate number outside your city number. But folks feel like they now have your personal number. I can call or I can text the chief or the commissioner. This is their person. There's that connection. They feel important. And when you have the ability to call someone who's going from sugar to cacao, right? It helps mix those things in the bud. So it's really important to do that. And, I had to learn it the hard way. I felt like I lost a year in 2020 because I was in the right rooms, but not necessarily the most appropriate people that can get things done.
I want to just take a moment and thank Lexipol for their support for today's program. Our next panel series is on February 26th. It'll be moderated by Michelle Walker and look at an international perspective on policing and best practices. I want to thank all of our audience that watched online. I want to thank those that are in the room today, and I'd love to give a large round of applause to our panel. Those that are watching, a copy of the recording will be posted online. For those in person, I encourage you to stick around afterwards to speak with the panel members. Thank you everyone very much for attending today. It's been such a pleasure.
What?